Welcome to this explainer. Let's just dive right in, shall we? When we read textbooks in school, it's incredibly easy to walk away thinking that human history is this perfectly solved, completely finished puzzle. We're taught these really neat chronological timelines filled with exact dates, famous names, and totally predictable revolutions. We're told exactly who built the pyramids and how technology just smoothly marched step by step from the Stone Age all the way to the Space Age. But if you actually talk to professional historians and archaeologists behind closed doors, well, they'll tell you something very, very different. The truth is, our historical timeline is absolutely full of massive gaping holes. So today, we're going to erase that myth of a perfectly solved timeline and look at the real, physical, documented evidence that still leaves the world's top scientists scratching their heads.
All right, starting right off with section 1, the myth of solved history. So the textbook timeline presents this beautifully clean, sequential progression, right? Nomads learn to farm, farmers build villages, and then villages become empires. But the messy reality? Real history is filled with entire eras where major civilizations just disappeared overnight. We're talking about artifacts that completely defy the technological timelines of their eras, and ancient texts that are still completely unreadable today. History isn't a straight line at all. It's honestly more like a giant puzzle that's missing half its pieces.
Which brings us to section 2, megaliths before their time.
Let's look at massive stone structures that completely break our accepted chronological rules, starting with Göbekli Tepe, which brilliantly illustrates this whole timeline problem. Discovered in Turkey by Klaus Schmidt back in 1994, this site was built around 9600 BCE. To put that into perspective, that is 6,000 years before Stonehenge and 7,000 years before the Egyptian pyramids. And it was built by hunter-gatherers, literally before the invention of agriculture, pottery, or even metal tools. Yet somehow, they quarried and carved these massive 16-ton limestone pillars with incredibly detailed reliefs of wild animals. According to traditional history, small nomadic tribes just shouldn't have had the social organization or engineering chops to pull this off. And even stranger, around 8,000 BCE, they deliberately and systematically buried the entire complex under thousands of tons of dirt.
And the mystery only deepens when we head over to the remote highlands of Laos. Here, we find the Plain of Jars. We're talking about over 2,500 massive stone jars, the largest ones weighing up to 30 tons, all dating back to 500 BCE. So what on earth were they? Were they mortuary urns for decomposing bodies? Rainwater collectors for ancient monsoon trade routes? Or, as some local legends suggest, giant brewing vats for rice wine? We literally have no idea. And the really tragic part is that those fields are completely littered with unexploded cluster bombs from the Vietnam War, meaning archaeologists can't even fully excavate the sites to get a proper answer.
Moving on to section 3, the sudden system collapses. How exactly do massive, interconnected, and highly globalized empires just vanish overnight? Well, picture the Eastern Mediterranean around 1250 BCE. It was a thriving, hyper-connected world of Egyptian, Hittite, and Mycenaean empires. Imagine being a merchant in one of these bustling ports, probably thinking your civilization would just last forever. But between 1200 and 1150 BCE, almost all of it burned to the ground. The crucial point here is a domino effect known as the systemic collapse theory. Deep-sea sediment cores actually show a severe, multi-decade drought hit the region. That led to crop failure and famine. Famine caused mass migration, which sparked wars and invasions, entirely disrupting the global trade of copper and tin, which of course they needed to make bronze weapons. One domino fell and the entire system just collapsed, plunging the whole region into a 400-year dark age. And right in the middle of all this chaos, a horrifying new threat emerged. Ancient Egyptian records call them the Sea Peoples, made up of phantom tribes with names like the Peliset, Shurden, Shekelesh, Luka, and Weshesh. These phantom raiders arrived in ox carts and war fleets. They fought Pharaoh Ramesses III, they destroyed the Hittite Empire, they literally helped burn the ancient world to the ground, and then they just completely vanished from the written records. We have no idea if they were a unified army or just desperate climate refugees turned pirates, and we really don't know where they came from or where they went. Or just compare standard ancient empires with the Indus Valley Civilization. Around 2600 BCE, this was a massive megacity empire of 5 million people, featuring advanced grid planning and the world's very first urban plumbing. But unlike Egypt or Mesopotamia, archaeologists have found no kings, no grand tombs, no monuments to war, and only very modest burials. So how did they maintain order over 1 million square kilometers without a visible monarchy or an army? Adding to the mystery, their script remains entirely undeciphered today. By 1900 BCE, this peaceful silent megacity suddenly disappeared and we still don't know why.
Okay, let's jump into Section 4, Artifacts Out of Time. Let's look at some physical objects dug out of the dirt that absolutely defy the technological timelines of their eras. Take this astonishing object found in a 1st century BCE Roman shipwreck, the Antikythera mechanism. Inside a totally corroded lump of bronze, scientists found over 30 precision-cut gears. It was essentially an ancient analog computer. By turning a hand crank, it actually tracked the sun and moon through the zodiac, predicted eclipses, mapped the 5 known planets, and even tracked the 4-year Olympic cycle. It even compensated for the moon's regular, varying speed. This complex mechanical clockwork predates similar European technology by over 1,400 years. Where did this tech even come from, and why on earth was it lost for a millennium?
Next up, we have the Voynich Manuscript. It was bought by a rare book dealer in 1912, and carbon dating places its creation right in the early 15th century Italian Renaissance. It's filled with unknown plants, astrology, and bizarre drawings of women bathing in these strange green interconnected pipes. But the text itself is in an entirely unknown language, one that has literally defeated World War II codebreakers and modern AI. Historians are pretty split between 2 main theories here. On one hand, it could be an unbreakable medieval cipher, maybe hiding secret alchemical or medical knowledge. But on the other hand, it could just be an elaborate 15th century hoax created by a con artist to sell to some rich monarch. Both sides make really compelling arguments, but the pages remain completely unreadable. And then, we have the Roman dodecahedrons. Over 130 of these weird, hollow bronze objects have been found across northern Europe. They feature 12 pentagonal faces with varying size holes and little spherical knobs on the corners. You want to know the most infuriating part? The Romans were incredibly meticulous record keepers. They wrote manuals on absolutely everything. Yet there is zero mention of these objects in all of surviving Roman literature. Not one single word. Hypotheses range from them being tools for knitting woolen gloves, to land surveying devices, to Celtic religious fortune-telling charms. But for now, the truth remains a total mystery. All right, moving to Section 5, Bizarre Human Anomalies. Let's get into the strangest part of our investigation. 15, that is the number of people who were dying every single day at the peak of the 1518 Strasbourg dancing plague. In July of 1518, a woman named Frau Trophia stepped into the street and just began to dance in sheer agony. Within a month, 400 people had joined her, and they were completely unable to stop. The city council actually hired musicians and built a stage, thinking they just needed to, dance it out. Well, that backfired terribly, and dozens died of heart attacks and sheer exhaustion. Was it ergot poisoning from a toxic fungus on rye grain? Or was it a mass psychogenic illness triggered by extreme famine and disease? Exactly how the brain's primal reflex to stop moving was overridden like that remains a truly terrifying medical anomaly. And that medical mystery blends seamlessly into our next strange anomaly. Listen to this eerie quote from 12th century England. "We followed the sound of bells through a long stone tunnel and emerged into the bright sunlight." That is the reported testimony of the Green Girl of Woolpit. Harvest workers found a young brother and sister emerging from wolf trapping pits. They were wearing these strange, synthetic-feeling clothes, spoke a totally unrecognized language, refused to eat any normal food except raw green beans, and their skin was entirely green.
So how do we even begin to explain this? Well, the girl claimed they came from St. Martin's Land, this dim, subterranean world where everyone was green. Obviously, that's the mythological interpretation. But on the science side, the leading historical hypothesis suggests they were actually orphaned Flemish immigrants fleeing persecution. Suffering from extreme malnutrition, while hiding out in dense forests or flint mines, they likely developed chlorosis, which is a severe anemia known as green sickness that literally turns the skin a greenish hue. Their strange clothes were probably just regional Flemish garments, and the unknown language was a Dutch dialect. Whether it's a tragic true story of traumatized war refugees or just a pure medieval fairy tale, it's a fascinating human mystery.
Finally, we arrive at Section 6, the beautiful unknown.
This is where we tie all these incredible threads together. The most crucial point I want you to take away from this explainer is this. History isn't a finished textbook. It's an active, ongoing detective story. Looking at these massive gaps in our timeline reminds us that our ancestors were far more complex, resourceful, and unexpected than we often give them credit for. The anomalies,
The missing empires, the unreadable scripts, these aren't just frustrating roadblocks. They're exactly what makes human history such a beautiful puzzle. It means that somewhere out there, buried beneath the soil or sitting in a dusty archive, the very next missing piece of human history is just waiting to be uncovered by archaeologists, coders, and thinkers.
Please like and subscribe.